Get a paper airplane. It's a model of a real plane. It's not very accurate model of a real plane, but is it useful? Yes. So, models are approximates of reality. Sometimes they're useful. This one was made out of a D&D character sheet, which is also a model of the imaginary thing. This one isn't very useful because it printed all messed up. So models are an approximation of truth, right? They're not the actual truth. They're just sort of the truth. Hopefully they're the truth enough for whatever you're doing. The Kano model is no different, and hopefully it'll be very valuable and useful to you. So what is it? First, let's start with a relationship between functionality and satisfaction, right? There's a relationship there. The more the functionality that you give to the users, your customers, that they actually want, not just here is random functionality, but functionality they actually want, their satisfaction is generally going to go up. But the relationship between functionality and satisfaction is not necessarily just like this straight line. It can be, but it can be sort of all over the place. It might be something that they have to have some level of functionality and they become, not dissatisfied. If you give them a lot, maybe they love it. If you give them a little, maybe they love it. There's like an infinite number of possibilities there on what that relationship is. The Kano model puts them into a few useful buckets. It actually puts them in more than that, but there's really only a few that we really care about. So the first bucket for these pieces of functionality is basic. Right? This basic functionality is stuff that customers don't even necessarily know to ask for, right? So if you're doing a medical device and the customer might not even say to you, hey, this has got to be sterile, in situations where it's got to be sterile, because that's just such a fundamental thing that the thing has to be or do or have, that they might not even mention it, right? For earbuds, you're interviewing customers for your fancy new earbuds, they might not even say the phrase Bluetooth, even though it's got to have Bluetooth if it's wireless earbuds, right? So these are things that are just, some people call them table stakes, whatever phrase you want to use, that's fine. But these are things that it's just got to have. A car has got to have brakes. If it doesn't have brakes, people aren't buying it. Most people aren't buying it. There's probably a segment somewhere where they would buy it, but that's a different thing. Then there are the performers. Not like, I have a skull here somewhere. I don't know. Then there are the performers. These are the things that the more you give them, the happier the customer is, right? There's some bare minimum they need, but then the more you give them, the better it is, right? Storage capacity on a flash drive or hard drive or something, just there's some minimum amount, otherwise they wouldn't even hold the thing, buy the thing, purchase the thing, whatever, but then the more you give them, the better it is. Another performer might be the acceleration on your car, right? You're going to have some base acceleration or you're not getting on the highway in, a safe manner. But then you might also want more and more of it, right? There's a base amount where you're okay, I wouldn't even buy the car if I can't safely get onto the highway, but I'll take more and more. I like really being able to speed up quickly. Now, you may or may not be that way. What's the difference? Well, market segmentation, right? So different segments have different needs behind their functionality, whether or not they need to be able to accelerate quickly or not, if that's really part of what they're looking for, because of their behaviors, because of what they want to be doing, however, whatever their preferences or needs are, it's going to change from segment to segment. Then there are the delighters, the things that they won't necessarily know they want, or they don't necessarily even want them yet, but it's functionality that when you give it to them, it delights them. It is aptly named delighters. An example of a delighter might be a much smoother process for whatever the app you have is, or whatever the hard good product you have is. If it takes them 2 less steps to do whatever that functionality is, if it's got a built-in calculator, if it has some other thing where they are doing less steps, pressing less buttons to get to their outcome, they might be like, oh, this took much less time than it is before, right? It's much easier to do this. It's much easier to log on. It's much easier to transfer money. It's much easier to reserve this place. The less steps they have to take, the happier they're going to be. And if it's much less than, previous apps or previous products, then they're going to be delighted. Of course, that's going to set the new standard, and that might not be a delighter for long. So these are the general 3 buckets that are useful to talk about. But again, understand that, there's sort of an infinite number of combinations amongst these. So how does MVP work into this? Well, the MVP is where the basic requirements are met to their, the base level, and the performers, aka linear performers, make it up to what the minimum amount you have to be able to do is, right? Delighters aren't in the picture when you're talking about minimal viable products, right? It's just getting the basic and the performers up to their base required level for you to have a viable product. Now, a note, over time, things that are delighters become the performers, and things that are performers become basic, right? Over time, these are things that they just have to be a requirement. Once upon a time, cup holders in a car were a delighter. Nowadays, I know people who won't buy a car if there aren't abundant cup holders in the thing, right? So as the people get used to it, as users get used to the product and used to certain functionality, they still want it, right? Now, the cup holders is a specific solution to holding a cup functionality, but you get the point. One place we see this on a relatively quick timescale is with lead users and or beta testers, depending on what your product line is. So these are folks that are generally cool with there being some product issues, right? Something with the new functionality, the delighting functionality doesn't quite work right. They're pretty much stoked to just be using the product before all their friends. But as time goes by, they expect a lot of that delighter stuff to be just part of the performance, the base performance of the product. And so they're going to expect it to reach a certain level of quality and actually provide the functionality that it's supposed to provide. By the way, functionality is really what is best to use on the Kano model. Some folks you'll see will have needs or features or something, but really it's what the functionality is. What is it doing for them, right? And it doesn't matter what the actual solution is. It means what is the functionality, the functions that they're able to perform with this thing, with this product, that brings the value to them, right? Because we're going to be bringing value to the customer. That's what we're really trying to do.